Okay, hello YouTube. Today we're going to be going over the mainline Yugoslav Dragon. We're going to be going into a dragon variation. White's going to play bishop c4. We're going to have this early queen a5 in this position. We're going to have rook fc8. We're actually going to have white play this safety move. We're going to have king b1. We're going to have knight e5. We're going to have h4. And we're going to have the move that I recommend in this position. We're going to have this waiting move, rook on a to b8. And now we're going to have the super main line in this position. We're going to have this move, pawn to g4, which is going to lead to some pretty extreme complications. And we're going to be just taking a deep dive into these positions. So if you like content like this and you want to see more of it, please hit that subscribe button and click on your notification icon. Now, g4 is basically White's signal that he wants to play g4 and he wants to play h5. And he wants to just basically play for mate against the black king. So in these positions, both sides are going to be playing super aggressive attacks. White's going to be playing an aggressive attack against the black king, and black is going to be playing an aggressive attack against the white king. So needless to say, this is all going to come down to how good your preparation is and how much you know about the theory. So the first thing you need to do is you need to play the move pawn to b5, and then white should continue, because we are basically in a car without breaks at this point. We should play the move pawn to h5. The move knight to d5 cashing out is a bad idea. That just generally leads to advantage black in these situations. It's too late to cash out. So h5, we're going to go ahead and we're going to play the move knight to c4. Now, in this case, the move knight to c4 is sound because the king is on b1. But if the king is on c1, you actually can't get away with knight to c4 in those positions. You're down one tempo. You're one tempo short of getting an attack to land against the white king. But this extra tempo, inserting these moves rook b8 and inserting the move king b1, makes the move knight c4 possible to play, and black's position should be sound after bishop c4, bc4, opening up the b file against the white king, and black just basically playing for an attack from here. Now, there's basically two moves that can get played here. There's this move king to a1, just trying to safeguard everything. And this is apparently the best move, and this is the move that leads to some sort of slight advantage white. If we play king a1 and we play everything absolutely perfectly. The other move that we can play here is we can play the move h captures g6. And this move leads to either advantage black, or if you play everything correctly and you don't fall for any pitfalls as white, it leads to some sort of equality if everything's played correctly. So the correct response to hg6 is not to recapture. It's actually to counterattack with the move queen to b4 and threaten mate on the b2 square. This really limits white's options, and this starts becoming a forced sequence of moves fairly quickly. After g captures f7, which is relatively forced, we're in check. We have to play king f7. We have to block this mate on the b2 square. It turns out there's really only one way to do it, and that's throwing the knight in the way. We need to play knight to b3 to block this mate. There really isn't anything else. You could try to play the knight blocking the mate this direction as well, but that would have very similar consequences. This would actually have worse consequences. You would just simply take like bishop b5. We'll just make a move here. A3, queen a5, g5, bishop c6 should be decisive advantage black. So like a sample line would be bishop pawn takes knight. We would have queen takes a3, threatening mate on b2 again, queen c1, and then bishop f6. And we have absolutely everything aiming at the white king. And this is essentially game over. We just have to get out of a couple of checks. So rook h7 check, king e8, and now they don't really have any more checks. There is no rook h8, there is no rook e7, those are both covered. So bishop d2 would be forced, and then we're going to have bishop takes c3, bishop takes c3, queen takes c3, rook on d to h1, rook b5 is completely winning for black. So knight on d to b5, putting the knight in the way that way isn't a good idea. So we're going to have to play knight b3. So knight b3 gets played, cb3, and ab3. So this isn't the end of the world for white. You know, white just lost a piece, but of course white has also managed to stop up the queen side pretty good, and black is going to have to try to find some way to continue the attack. And of course white is going to be continuing the attack against black's very open king as well. So this game certainly isn't over, but black is doing very, very good here. And the correct next move is bishop e6, and then white should continue his attack with the move pawn to g5. Now here, I had this position, the very first time I had this position in a blitz game, I played the incorrect move, knight to e8, and then I actually ended up losing with the black pieces. Now this turned out to be a very valuable lesson to me, because I ended up looking at the engine after this game, and I've managed to win a whole bunch of games after this by playing the correct move in this position, which I never would have found without that initial engine assistance. But this is a move that definitely needs to be in your repertoire. It's a really cool move, and it's a move that you probably wouldn't think of. So take a second, pause the video, see if you can find the super move here for black. Okay, now if you think you found the super move, you're probably wrong, because it's not anything normal looking. It's not knight takes e4, it's not even knight g4, it's not knight d5, and it's not knight d7, and it's not some other move. It is a knight move. The move is actually knight h5. That's right. That's the super move in this position. We put our knight on a square where it can get captured for nothing. Because in the Dragon Sicilian, when both sides have castled opposite wings like this, the only thing that matters is who gets there first. And apparently the best and most important thing that this knight can do in this situation is just give itself up for a tempo. Because remember, tempos actually count for something in chess. One move is worth something. And when you have kings castled on opposite wings, one move can possibly be worth a lot of something. Because getting there first is the only thing that matters. So yes, this knight's most valuable contribution to the position at this point in time is as a meat shield. If you put the knight on e8, it will never do anything ever again for the rest of the game. It'll actually get in the way. It'll block the king from escaping. So the best thing that I can do is just go to h5 and just say, yeah, go ahead, spend a move to take me with your rook. See what happens. So that's what white should do. He should take, because he's got to get to the black king, and he's got to go through the knight to do it. So rook takes h5 is forced. Then here's the idea. The idea is simply rook takes c3. So we're following up this sacrifice of the knight with a sacrifice of the exchange. So we're just letting it all hang out. We're sacrificing all of it. We're getting rid of every single piece, people. We don't care. Now, it is actually possible to also play bishop c3. And bishop c3 should also lead to a fairly simple perpetual check. So like after bishop c3, bc3, queen a3, for example, rook h7, king e8, we're threatening rook b3 in this case. At some point, somebody's going to have to cash out with perpetual. But first, they actually have to find this, I guess, this saving move here, bishop c5. They have to just throw this in the way. They have to have a meat shield too. And then we have rook c5, and then they have to play rook e7. So that's the whole idea, is to get the rook to c5 so it's no longer defending the b8 rook. So we would play something like king f8 here. We don't want to play king e7. We'd be losing, so king f8 is apparently the only move. Then we would have rook b7, throwing that rook in the way as well as a meat shield, rook b7, and then they could finally finagle a perpetual with queen d6, king f7, g6 check, king g7, queen d4 check, king g8, queen d8, and then repeat queen d4 and queen d8. So I don't know what the odds are of white finding all those moves, so bishop takes c3 might be the way to go if you don't think the odds of white finding all of those saving moves are very high, because they are very difficult to find. But bishop c3 and rook c3 are apparently equivalent. In both cases, with best play, it's supposed to lead to some sort of perpetual for white. So if we play this rook c3, we're going to have rook h7 here. And then we have this sacrifice, this continuation sacrifice, rook takes c2. Now at this point, white needs to find a very non-obvious move to survive. The only move that survives is this move queen to d4. And again, this leads to this goofy type of equal position that isn't quite a perpetual, but the position should be completely equal. So like the main idea would be something like rook b2, queen b3, rook g7, king f8, and then after this exchange we would take this rook, and then we have a completely equal position. Everybody has 3 pawns in this position, and we have opposite colored bishops. So like for example, you know, if rook d3, we could just exchange rooks, and then we could all shake hands because we have opposite colored bishops. So going back, if white does anything else that doesn't really match with that, like if white takes this rook, for example, apparently black is completely winning. Like we can play bishop takes b3, queen h2, we're going to have bishop takes d1, we're going to have pawn g6, we're going to have king e8, rook g7, bishop back to b3 is apparently a winning advantage. So the main idea here is that we're threatening a lot of things. Like for example, queen e1 is a huge threat. So like if white were to just kind of play a random move, like say bishop g5, trying to continue the attack against e7, we could play queen e1, bishop c1, queen a5 is threatening mate on a2, and this is apparently a winning attack. So because of this, as soon as we play this move, bishop to b3, they have to play something a little different. They have to be super aggressive here. They have to play rook e7 to try to get out of this, king e7, and then they're just trying to finagle a perpetual, but in this case they don't have quite enough squares to get to do it. And black can actually hide over here on the king side, and this is really goofy. White doesn't have a way to continue checking black indefinitely once he loses the pawn on g6. He needs to keep black in check basically forever to stay alive. So like after the computer recommended move, which is queen h2, black should take the pawn, and then he should just escape all the checks and run to the queen side, and his position is decisively better because he is up a whole rook in this position. So that's going back. That is what we do in this kind of wild and crazy line where they start with h captures g6. So what is the absolute correct move here for white? Well, white should play the move king a1. And this does lead to a slight advantage white if white plays everything correctly. Now, black should follow up by playing rook b6, and black's main idea is to double the rooks on the b file and to get an attack along the a file. So he's trying to rook shuffle rook b6 to a6. So one of the cute threats that's very possible here is after hg6, black has to reply fg6, because he actually does have to slow down white's attack significantly. And this is the reason that white does end up slightly better in these positions if white plays everything perfectly. It's because now that black's pawn structure is kind of broken, not all of these endgames are going to be great for black anymore, and white can enjoy an endgame advantage if he manages to survive. So here, one of the threats that black has is to put pressure on the b2 pawn, force rook b1, and then do something really nasty to white. So if white plays like a really lazy move, just like for instance, like rook h2, we could play something like rook cb8, rook b1, and then bishop g4 would be a completely winning sacrifice. The idea would be bishop g4, f g4, knight takes e4, with this really cute idea of knight takes e4, queen a2, king a2, and then rook a6, forcing white to sack his queen, and then rook takes a5 is mate. And I've actually gotten this exact mate a whole bunch of times in blitz chess, and it's a lot of fun to play this checkmate. It is a lot of fun to get it in. So what is white supposed to do in this situation? Well, the correct approach in this situation for white is to play something like g5 and kick that knight right away, and then we're going to have knight h5. So at this point, what is white playing for? At this point, white is actually playing for an endgame. Once you play g5 and knight h5, you're not going to get your kingside attack anymore. It's not going to happen. So at this point, white needs to play for an endgame, and white needs to stop up black's attack very accurately. The best move to do that would be something like knight on d to e2 to make sure that everything is safeguarded, and also to kind of unlock the threat of queen d5 to simply exchange queens. So now after rook a6, putting that pressure on the a file, white should exchange queens and get rid of that pressure. So after queen d5, knight d5, this position is supposed to be slight edge white, and black actually has to be very accurate in his next couple of moves just so he doesn't get into trouble. First he needs to sidestep that fork. He needs to play rook b8 and put some pressure on b2, force white to at least defend with one defensive move. Bishop d4, then he needs to get that pawn out of the line of fire with e6. Knight e3 can get played here, although there are other moves. E5 can get played, bishop back to c3. We're going to have bishop e6 defending that pawn onto c4 square, and then we're going to have, we'll just say knight d5. Now here, according to at least one piece of engine analysis that I had, the best line of play for black is rook b7, rook h4, and then rook f7. And then if white starts attacking black's weaknesses directly with something like bishop b4, we can actually throw in bishop takes d5 and equalize the position. So like bishop d5 and then say e takes d5, knight f4 is supposed to be equality. But of course it's not clear that bishop to b4 is forced, and what is clear is that white should have some sort of slight edge here simply because he has more space, but probably nothing more than that. It doesn't seem like any of the weaknesses in black's camp are overly accessible, so black should be okay in this position, even though white should be slightly better. So anyways, just, going back to all of this stuff, that is the theory. That is how you should play against this king b1, g4, h5 plan. You should play knight c4, bishop c4, bc4, and start trying to generate play against the white's castled king over there on the queen side. So I hope you found this video helpful. I hope you learned something new about chess, and I hope you can use some of these ideas in your own games. Thank you very much for watching.